Hi, this is Lesia Toney, and I am the middle school Sunday school teacher for Cross Gates United Methodist Church in Brandon, Mississippi. And we have been studying a lesson on stress and God's advice on how we can reduce the stress in our lives. This is today we're going to have part 3 of our 4-part series. So I'm going to remind you a little bit. Back in part 1, we talked about a verse out of Proverbs that was Proverbs chapter 12, verse 25. And it said, "Anxiety weighs down our heart, but a kind word can cheer it up." And in that lesson, we talked a lot about how we can't just think about all the stuff that gets us down, all the negative that's going on in our life. You have to balance it with thinking about the happy things and the thankful things and all the good stuff that we have too. And that when we balance the good and the bad, that we feel less stressed out every day. And then in part 2, we talked about a verse out of Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. That's my favorite verse. And that verse says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, plans for you to prosper and not to harm, plans to give you hope and a future." And in that lesson, God gave us advice to see that there is future, that there is hope in our future, that the problems that we have are temporary, they're not permanent, and although we're always going to have stressful things that we have to deal with, we can reduce our stress by looking forward and seeing the good things that are to come and the good things that God has planned for us, because God does want great things for us. So today we're going to move on to our lesson 3. And in this lesson, God has more advice for us. And this time, He's going to give us some advice about ways that we might actually can avoid ever getting into those stressful situations at all. Ways that we can kind of gear or tilt our lives so that we can maybe run into a little less stress every day. So we're going to start with an example about priorities. And generally when we think about priorities, it is, you need to get your priorities straight. You need to do your homework first and before you go play. For me, when I get off work, I know that there's things that I need to get done. I need to try to get one thing done for the house. We do have to cook and eat. The dogs need to go for a walk. Lately, you've been trying to fit time in every day to take care of driving before she gets her license. For you, it might be you're home and your parents say, "Hey, first you need to get your schoolwork done, clean your room, do your chores before you turn on the television or start gaming." And so those are priorities, just kind of how we set our day up. We're going to talk about these priorities at maybe a little different level, maybe a little more strategically. So we're going to talk about how the things that we think about and just our core beliefs and what's really important to us shape some of the decisions that we make. So I have some examples. So there are things that we love, like we may not love it, but we know that education is important. We do want to get a good education. We want to be able to go to college, get a good job, set ourselves up for the future. We know that's important. And we have our friends. Our friends are really important to us, part of our day-to-day lives and what help us out. Entertainment, so that gaming, movies, reading, whatever it is that you do that just kind of entertains us, those are all important too. This one I put a bunch of sides on. These are kind of the activities that we're engaged in. So we have sports. I also put cheer or just different activities, choir, whatever it is that we're trying to do and come up with that keep us. And we can't forget about our family. So our family is a very, very special part of our lives that we cherish. We love our families and want to spend time with them. But sometimes trying to kind of, as I try to keep these straight, keep all of these together. And what's important, we can't forget, we also have God. We love God. And it's the most important thing we have, our faith and our church. And sometimes trying to juggle all of these things is hard. And so in our lesson today, we're going to talk about how if we start with the most important thing first instead of last and say, "Hey, what if this was the most important thing and we put that first, and then maybe our family and our friends," oops, this is hard, getting an education, being able to be on the team. What if we put the most important things first and built a foundation that would actually help us to put things together? It might not make it perfect, but it definitely would make it easier. And anytime we can make things easier, then we start to feel less stress, a little less every day. How we prioritize our stuff can either increase our stress levels, trying to figure out how we can juggle everything, or it can reduce our stress levels. And along with that, we're going to talk about how the decisions that we make can increase or decrease those stress levels. Sometimes we also can be influenced by the decisions of the people around us. How the decisions that other people make affect our lives every day. And we need to make sure that we're aware of what we're doing with that. So I have an example. So we're going to use this example today and say, this is our bubble. This is an example of the people that we come in contact with every day. And going to school, going to work, going home, just the people that we run into, meet, interact with on an everyday basis. And sometimes the things that we do influence the people around us. So I am going to say, what if you have a friend who has great taste in music? I'm going to say, what if they have great taste in music? And so we're going to put them in the box with you and say, as we go about our day-to-day lives, guess what? Some of their taste in music now rubbed off on us. And so now maybe maybe some of our friends can appreciate some of our good taste in music. Or what if we have a friend who is a really great reader and they convince us that we should read some really good books? Okay, so that can do something for us too. What if we have a friend who says, I really need to study and make good grades, so we need to make that a priority, and how about you study with me? How about you study with me and I'll help you with your project and you can help me with my project, and we're going to call this one this color and put those in there too. So, and then we keep going about our day-to-day lives, looking at things and how we interact with people and do things. And you can see that before we know it, each of our lives have been touched a little by those people around us and how we interact with them. And then something else comes along, and maybe we get a new person in our group of friends and the people that we hang out with. And I love this phrase because my girls always use it all the time. She can be really nice when she wants to be, which means that the rest of the time, she's probably choosing to not be nice. And maybe she has a tendency to say hurtful things. And so she says things intentionally to hurt people because she knows maybe it's not a nice thing to do, but she does anyway. And she joins our group. And while absolutely some of those other things that we talked about may be influencing her, guess what? Some of those tendencies that she has to be mean might be rubbing off on you as well. Or what if one of our friends has a tendency to lie, deceive people? Maybe they don't see much wrong with you not telling your parents something, or just lying in general about the other friends that are in your group. And so that comes and joins part of it too. I think I'm getting a mess here. And then I'm going to use one more. What if someone really likes to watch things, videos, clips, YouTubes, Maybe they follow people on TikTok or something else, and sometimes it's really funny, but sometimes you realize that maybe it isn't appropriate and maybe it's not the right thing to do. And so we're going to use this one for that. So I'm going to shake all these up and say, so these are all people that we come in contact with all day. We see them, or not even all day, we see them on a regular basis. They're part of our group, part of our circle. And guess what? Before we know it, this is who we become. We become influenced by the people that are around us, the people that we come in contact with every day. So sometimes the choices that other people make influence us. And sometimes we get to choose, or sometimes we don't get to choose who we spend time with. Maybe they're your coworker that sits next to you. Maybe they're a person who's in your choir, a person who's in your classes. You don't get to pick. They're there, and that you didn't really choose to spend time with them, but now you have to. And we have to learn to deal with that. But all the time, we do get to choose to be aware that we know what they're doing. We understand their decisions. We understand their lifestyles, and we can then make a decision to try to not let it influence us so much by being aware of what they're doing. We can make conscious decision to not let their decisions become our decisions if we think about it and consciously look at who we're hanging out with, and if you don't have a choice who we're hanging out with or who we're doing things with, saying, I realize that they do that, and that's not the decision that I want to make for me. So we have a Bible verse for today. I have two versions of it. I'm going to use part of this to wipe my hands off. Two versions of it. I'm going to put this here that says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good and pleasing and perfect will. Romans 12:2. So I like this verse. I like this another version of it, maybe a little better. So this one says, do not become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God, and you'll be changed from the inside out. Still Romans 12:12, just a little different version. I like this one better because it says, don't be changed without thinking. So if there's something someone's doing that's good, and you're like, I really love that they take the time to do a devotion every day or to study every day, and I want to make that part of my habits, then great. You made a conscious decision and you thought about it. You can make the same decision and say, I see what they're doing, what this other person is doing, and I don't want that for my life. And that's what God is telling us, that we can consciously think about the influences of the world around us and make decisions about how we're going to let it influence. And maybe in that process, we can avoid some situations. So today we talked about our priorities and our decision making, and how it can affect our stress levels. And God's giving us more advice. And this time the advice is on how we can avoid stress on our life by the priorities and decisions that we make. And I hope that you can see that God's plan that he has for us is to put the right things first and to make conscious effort to not be influenced by the wrong decisions in our lives that can cause us stress. Because God does. He loves us so much that he took the time to give us this advice and gave us a book full of stories and things that we can use to reduce this stress level. And not only how to deal with it, but maybe how to avoid it completely, or maybe not completely, but to avoid as some of the stress that can come our way. So next week we're going to have our last lesson, and it is on stress that comes from being from being afraid and having fear in our lives, and some of the things we can do to avoid that fear and maybe gain a little self-confidence along the way. Thank you for joining. I'm going to close this in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us a plan. Thank you for helping us find ways to deal with the stress that we can't avoid, that's going to become part of our lives. And thank you for giving us a plan to help find ways to avoid stress where we can. And as always, keep us safe and bring us back together soon. In your name I pray. Amen. Thank you.